Biden also seemingly is picking up steam on the SCOTUS attacks. Let's take a look at that. SCOTUS is also a deeply unpopular institution right now.
In his first address after the tragedy, President Johnson said, and I quote, "Nothing could more eloquently honor President Kennedy's memory than the earliest passage of the Civil Rights Bill." That's what he said. As a kid coming up, I always admired President Johnson for his public service, whether it was a school teacher in South Texas, master of the United States Senate, historic vice president and president. His philosophy was simple. In a great society, no one should be left behind. He'd say, "It's time for us to come to see that every American gets a decent break and a fair chance to make good." As Andy Young said, President Johnson.
Yeah, of course he's glazing Johnson, dude. Literally had to resign for his unconditional support for objectively unpopular war, while simultaneously he also had to resign and is also advocating for an unimaginably unpopular war.
These three landmark laws he signed are remarkable in their scale and their scope. Taken together, these three acts have made this nation fundamentally more fair, fundamentally more just, and most importantly, fundamentally more consistent with our founding principles. For real. And we're a better nation because of them. We must be clear. Their work, our work, is not done. It's not done. We do not celebrate these laws as part of our past, but as critical components of our future. President Johnson understood what President Lincoln understood in his own time, that the courts would determine the scale and scope of our laws. Over 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, President Johnson vowed, in his words, to do this job that Lincoln started, by challenging the court to live up to its constitutional responsibility. He did that by nominating Thurgood Marshall as the first black justice of the Supreme Court. And by aggressively defending civil rights throughout the courts. But now we live in a different era. In recent years, extreme opinions that the Supreme Court has handed down have undermined long-established civil rights principles and protections. 2013, the Supreme Court in Shelby County case gutted the Voting Rights Act. In 2022, the court overruled Roe v. Wade. The following year, the same court eviscerated affirmative action. And now there's an extreme movement and agenda called Project 2025. Well, by the way, they're serious, man. Project 2025 calls aggressively attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion. And most recently and most shockingly, the Supreme Court established in Trump versus the United States a dangerous precedent. They ruled, as you know, that the President of the United States has immunity for potential crimes he may have committed while in office. Immunity. The court's being used to weaponize an extreme and unchecked agenda. This decision is a total affront to the basic expectations we have for those who wield the power in this nation.
They swapped this motherfucking drugs out? What's going on?
They are expected to be wholly accountable under the law. The president is no longer constrained by the law, and only limits on abuse of power will be self-imposed by the president alone. That's a fundamentally flawed view and a fundamentally flawed principle, a dangerous principle. On top of its extreme decisions, the court is mired in a crisis of ethics. These scandals involving the justices have caused public opinion to question the court's fairness and independence that are essential to faithfully carrying out its mission of equal justice under the law. For example, there are documented reports of a decades-long effort to reshape the judiciary, including the Supreme Court backed by shadow special interests that also support Project 2025. Undisclosed gift to justice is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars from wealthy benefactors who have interest before the very court they're contributing to. Conflicts of interest from those connected to January 6th insurrectionists. And a blatant attack on nominating and confirming justices of the court itself. Do you all remember when Justice Scalia died in February of 2016? And the Republicans blocked the president's nomination, President Obama's nomination, to fill that vacancy for nearly a year by making up an entirely new standard that there be no confirmations of the court during an election year. But then, when Justice Ginsburg died in 2020, Republicans rushed through the President Trump's nominee at the very same time votes are being cast in an election that Trump would lose. It's outrageous. I know I don't look it, but I served in the Senate for 36 years. Including as chairman and ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. I've been told that I've overseen more Supreme Court nominations as senator, vice president, and president than anyone in history, anyone alive today, I should say. I have great respect for our institutions and the separation of powers laid out in our Constitution. But what's happening now is not consistent with that doctrine of separation of power. Extremism is undermining the public confidence in the court's decisions. As soon as I came to office, I convened a bipartisan presidential commission on the Supreme Court of the United States, comprised of leading constitutional scholars, both liberal and conservative, to provide recommendations on potential reforms to the court. I've been careful in these deliberations because these are serious, serious decisions. In the face of increasing threats to American democratic institutions, I use the Commission's analysis, and today I'm calling for 3 bold reforms to restore trust and accountability.
It's kind of crazy that they're like finally using the broad unpopularity of the Supreme Court, which has like received its worst marks as an institution, to literally finally turn around and like hit this on partisan angles. You had a right-wing supermajority dumbass. Like, why didn't you do anything?
Constitutional amendment called "No One Is Above the Law" amendment. It holds.
What?
And I mean this sincerely. It holds that there's no immunity for crimes former president committed while in office. I share our founders' belief that the president must answer to the law. The president is accountable in the exercise of the great power of the presidency. We're a nation of laws, not kings and dictators. The decision can be boiled down to the title of one case: Trump versus the United States. The court asserted it was making a ruling for the ages. That isn't true. The court made a ruling for one, a former president. No other president in our history has asked for this kind of immunity for criminal action. And no president, no former president, not me, not one, should have been given any exception to this with such immunity. The second thing I'm asking for: we've had term limits for presidents of the United States for nearly 75 years after the Truman administration. And I believe we should have term limits for Supreme Court justices of the United States as well. In fact, the United States is the only major constitutional democracy that gives lifetime seats in their high court. Term limits would help ensure that the court membership changes with some regularity. That would make timing for the court's nomination more predictable and less arbitrary. Reduce the chance that any single presidency imposes undue influence in generations to come. The bipartisan commission I convened analyzed various term limit structures. Based on their report, I believe the best structure is the 18-year term limit. That would help ensure the country would not have what it has now: an extreme court that's the product of an attack on the confirmation process that's been weaponized by those seeking to carry out an extreme agenda for decades to come. By the way, these guys mean it. These guys mean it. Project 2025 is real. They mean it. Third, I'm calling for a binding code of conduct for the Supreme Court. Supreme Court's current ethics code is weak and, even more frightening, voluntary. Any code of Congress must be enforceable. Under the reform I propose, justice would be required to disclose gifts, refrain from public political activity, recuse themselves in cases in which they or their spouses have a financial or other conflict of interest. Most people don't realize that Congress passed a law decades ago that says all federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, have to recuse themselves in such cases. But the current justices insist on enforcing that requirement themselves without any public oversight or compulsion. See, that's their decision. They don't have to tell us how they made it. That might work. The court was actually enforcing those requirements, but they are not. The court is not self-policing. The court is not dealing with the obvious conflicts of interest. We need a mandatory code of ethics for the Supreme Court, and we need it now. My fellow Americans, Based on all my experience, I'm certain we need these reforms. We need these reforms to restore trust in the courts, preserve the system of checks and balances that are vital to our democracy. They're also common sense reforms that a vast majority of the American people support, as well as leading constitutional law scholars, progressives, and conservatives. I look forward to working with the Congress to implement these necessary reforms. A number of members of Congress are here today. Let me close with this. President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 just 2 days before the 4th of July. He said in that bill signing, and I quote, "This is a proud triumph, yet those who founded our country knew that freedom would be secure only if each generation fought to renew in largest meaning," end of quote. That's what I've tried to do throughout my career, inspired by the cause of civil rights. That's what got me involved initially. My state was a state that was segregated by law. We were one who only reason we didn't fight in the side of the South, we couldn't get there.
Yeah, I like it. If it's retroactive, Alito, Thomas, and Roberts are gone.
County councilman. I'll never forget, I had a good job with a big trial firm. And,
not that it matters, because I don't think that it's gonna happen. But
study for the bar for 6 months before you're allowed to take it. And in the meantime, I was studying for the bar. That's when Dr. King was assassinated. We're the only state in the nation, city in the nation, that had the military stationed on every corner with drawn bayonets for 10 months, insisting, because we had a very conservative Democratic governor. In those days, when the Democrats won, they could
I low-key
choose
don't
to be
think this is
part
a
of
bad
Southern
thing.
Governors or Northeast Governors Conference.
okay, he's just talking about history. Exclusive. The White House didn't consult Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin and other key congressional Democrats on Biden's proposal to dramatically overhaul the Supreme Court. I'm not kidding. This is a good thing, because what the has Dick Durbin done? What the has that goddamn charlatan done at the Senate Judiciary? He should have been doing this already. He should have had long, drawn out, televised, highly explosive committee hearings in the Senate Judiciary Committee, where he brought up Supreme Court of the United States justices and called them out for literally lying to Congress when they were being appointed. He should have done that with the ethics investigation, with the ethics violation investigations. He didn't do a single one of those things. Now, Biden is obviously doing this because this is good for his legacy. This is good for obviously like the Democratic Party's reelection chances in general. But like this is a good legacy move overall, and I think that's what he's going for now. He's going for a legacy run. I don't think it's going to pull through. Having said that, however, it's not a bad thing to advocate from the bully pulpit. That's it. What details on how the term limit works? If you want to know, I figure it won't pass, but I like the details. Okay, I don't know what going on, but your explore more posts are psychotic, or my explore more posts are psychotic underneath the thing that you just linked me, the Imgur link that you just linked me. But here, the proposal is very close to one White House proposed in the Senate. Basically, the current president appoints a new justice every odd year, non-election year, and the longest tenure justice served is moved to senior status. Every justice was served 18 years before being moved to senior status. Senior status means you are still Supreme Court justice, but you can only hear cases from original jurisdiction. Appellate jurisdiction, all appeal cases would only be heard by the newest 9 justices. Ooh, wait, this is like expanding the court without expanding it. The court's original jurisdiction is a set of cases that can be brought before it directly rather than on appeal. The Constitution doesn't allow Congress to change the court's original jurisdiction, but it does allow exceptions and regulations to its appellate jurisdiction. So this means if an original jurisdiction case comes up, 15 plus justices would hear that case. These are rare, but in normal cases we are used to the Supreme Court hearing would only be the most recent 9. Additionally, if a justice dies before they serve their 18 years, the Senate proposal has the current sitting president immediately replace their seat to bring the court back to 9. They would not skip their next odd year, and if it's in an odd year, they get 2. I mean, I think this is good. It's basically a way to pack the court without saying you're packing the court, which has, I think, a lot of political capital attached to it. Obviously, I don't think that like this will pass either, because why the would the Republicans allow such a thing to happen when they have a solid super majority? You know what I mean? So you would need a constitutional amendment. The only thing you could do would actually be the pack the court. Yeah. I mean, I don't even necessarily think packing the court is a bad idea, like, or a bad thing to advocate for, but at least the Democratic Party is like on the aesthetics front. I think that they're leaning on the unpopularity, the genuine, oh my God, Aya is snoring so fucking loudly right now. Hold on, let me see if you can hear it. No, you can't hear it. Never mind. Hold on. I'm trying to. It's not. The microphone is not picking it up. Let me see. She stopped snoring now. The best part is lawyers on Twitter, so grain of salt, say this doesn't need an amendment or worse is law, and to sue to overturn this if it passes will be near impossible. Who would have standing? Would Clarence Thomas sue the court to sit on the bench to decide in favor of himself? I mean, maybe. The 5 is reacting. Hogwatch. Wait, they're doing a reaction stream? Bro, they're trying to be me so bad. It's crazy.
Laid out a plan to break up the Supreme Court and then told a lot of great stories from the 70s. You had something you wanted to say before he so rudely interrupted you, Brian Kilmeade.
Well, I just think he just made the Supreme Court even more political if it's indeed possible. And he brings up Project 25 and
okay, he said Brian kill me. I'm not kidding.
John Roberts, the Supreme Court justice, saved Obamacare. And I just think he had opportunity to balance it out. But it's a campaign speech that he was probably going to make only.
He definitely said Brian kill me, right?
This great leader of the future probably wasn't in the original copy that he was going to say last week because he dropped out on Sunday. It's a little disappointing, but now the Supreme Court's going to be dragged through it. And I think that every time these Supreme Court justices, instead of walking around with pride, they're going to walk around feeling like they're a target.
And I just want to say something about it, too. I mean, he started this, he talked about fundamental fairness and you know, that they're going to undermine the
His name is Brian Kilmeade, not Brian Kill Me. That's the joke.
This guy just says one thing.
He gave his eulogy.
Yeah, he gave his eulogy. And then the other thing, they keep talking about making sure that these Supreme Court justices have an ethics guideline.
Wait, you guys,
so do my air staff.
Wait, you guys literally thought his name was Brian Kill Me? Oh my God, I'm so irresponsible with my platform. I've cultivated an entire generation of people accidentally saying Arkansas, jalapeno poppers, you know what I mean? And now thinking that the name is actually Brian Kill Me. A lot of you motherfuckers probably say Obabe, or not Obabe, sorry, Brandon. Like all of these like different things I say as a joke. You might do Obama or Obummer, but more importantly, you probably say Brandon. I never refer to Joe Biden as Joe Biden anymore. I always refer to him as Brandon. It's kind of crazy.